So I'm gonna be talking about reviewing two movies I watched that are gonna be, then I'm gonna be comparing the differences between the two. So the first one I watched was Cinderella, the animated version, which was made back in the 1950s, and versus the live action one that was made in 2015. Okay, let's break it down. So storyline wise, both were actually pretty similar. Like, they followed the same story, as in the live action one followed the same story as the animated one. You know, the typical Cinderella story, how the mother dies, the father's a widow. Cinderella's father marries like the stepmother that brings in her two stepdaughters, and they're all evil. And then after the father dies, the stepmother becomes what's that called? Basically mistreats Cinderella, and then she wants to go to a ball, but then they mistreat her, make her do chores and stuff, and then finally she ends up going to the ball because with the help of like the fairy godmother and stuff like that. Okay, but then it's like it gets really similar here and there, but I'm going to be talking about the differences between the two. So from what I've watched, basically I feel that the animated one was really targeted towards kids, whereas the live action one, I would say towards like young adults to adults, because like for the animated one you could see like a lot of the shots. First of all, the length of the movie, if I'm not mistaken, I'll check again later but the length of the movie for the animated versus the live action were about like 20 minutes difference, where the live action one was actually longer than the animated one. And I think for the 1950s, how much things they managed to animate inside was really good. But based on the narrative and like how they wrote the dialogue, there weren't a lot of dialogue in the animated one versus the live action. And also the live action one had more backstory that I'm not sure if the original like Grimm Brothers, the Cinderella, actually had these backstories, or was it completely different. But it definitely feels more, definitely compared to the animated one, the characters were more rounded, where the animated ones I felt were really really flat, which I'll get through like why I feel that way. So sorry, that was loud. I'll get through why I feel that way. So for the live action one, okay, yeah, the differences, oh my goodness, getting sidetracked again. It's like all the essays I've written. So for the live action one, I'm going to go like kind of like a shot by shot by like a short way summarizing the differences. The beginning of the Cinderella, for like the first one, right, the live action, they actually showed clips of her mom that has passed away, versus where the animated one, they already started off with like, this dude's a widow, right? So we actually can see, because there's going to be a theme in the live action one where the mother tells her to be brave and kind, which, as you can see, is what she kind of sticks to throughout the whole storyline, is that she wants to be brave, but she also is kind. That's why she kind of takes the mistreatment from the evil step family. Whereas in the animated one, they didn't really mention that. They just started off with, yeah, she's dead. And then also I feel like emotion wise also, the live action one definitely, I actually watched both back to back, and I watched the animated one first. I definitely felt more emotion coming from the live action one. So okay, yeah, so I'm gonna talk about the scenes. I'm not sure if I can find clips to the scenes. For the live action one, right, the part where I mentioned she was brave and kind, it was actually when Cinderella was small. Actually, I don't even think her name was Cinderella, it was just Ella, the live action one. Her mom was like, okay, Ella, be brave and kind, and she kind of like repeats that, and she remembers that a lot. And then like in one of the deathbed scenes, she told her like, always remember this one thing is to be brave and kind. So it's kind of like that. So it's like ingrained to her to be brave and kind. So that kind of gives meaning to the whole rest of the live action movie, where she acts the way she does, which is, even though the person mistreating her, she still acts kind. She still wants to do that. And then finally, when she steps up to her evil stepmother and stepsister, she becomes brave. So that was really, to me, it was really interesting. And then for the animated one, as I mentioned earlier, they just said like, oh, the mom passed away. So that's why when I was watching it, a lot of times I felt in the animated one was like, why is she acting the way she does, type of feeling, like, you know, like, dude, stand up for yourself. So I didn't really understand why, but watching the live action one, I kind of get it. Also, on a extra side note, I watched Cinderella 1, 2 and 3 for the animated one. I just wanted to see. I watched the first one, animated one, then I watched live action, and then I watched 2 and 3 because I just wanted to see whether the brave and kind thing was anywhere in the 2 other movies, but I didn't really see that there. I am not sure if it follows the Grimm brothers like writing of like that's what actually they intended, but or is that something Disney added in? But that was the difference between those two lah. And so, okay, back to the thing. So that was one of the first differences. Second difference is that I'm going to be focusing more to the live action because there's more to talk about. In the live action one, the falling up scenes is when she like goes outside. I think this was after her dad has passed away already. Also, I like how the live action one actually shows you the relationship she has with her father, which was it did add to the emotional impact, and you can see the reason why the stepmother kind of acts the way she does also is maybe out of jealousy, because she did mention in the live action one that she's like, you're just so pure and you're so innocent, and then she mentions a lot of good qualities, and she and the stepmother later on reveals in the live action one that why she was angry is because she was once that girl until her husband, the love of life, got taken away from her, and she's left to fend for her 2 children. And now her widowed husband has also been taken away from her. And she said, why are you so, like, you're like beautiful and innocent and kind. So maybe that's one of the motives as to why. And again, this was all not covered in the animation one. So you see the animation one is really targeted towards kids because it's really surface level. Everything is so clear cut. She's evil, she's bad. But this one kind of gives her depth, like it makes her more rounded. So you see that she's evil, but she has a human side that kind of relates back to us, that I feel like the emotions they play around with is really interesting. How she kind of battles with that. It's not that she wants to act that way, but something has been taken away from her, and because of that it leads to like this whole, like how it follows down this like rabbit hole of her just being worse and worse. And she also mentions in the live action one the reason why the evil stepmother is because now what she focuses on is not love, but is for her 2 daughters. So you can watch the movie. They reference this in the scene of like when Cinderella asks her like, why do you treat me this way? I've always been kind to you. What have I done to make you like, hate me so much to treat me this way? I don't like, I wouldn't treat anyone this way. So that was when she kind of explains like, the villain backstory, like, yeah. Basically, the live action one, all the characters kind of shows reasons as to why they act the way they do. Also, take note, the live action one, the prince had an introduction before they even met at the ball, and versus the animated one where the prince was kind of just there in the ball, which made me, as a viewer at this age, made me feel it was really shallow. That means you come in, look beautiful, then prince like you already, cannot be right? So for the live action one, it showed how the prince met up with her, and she kind of told him that brave and kind thing, and then she was trying to protect this deer that was like being hunted. It was like the prince and his people were hunting, and she was like, help the deer escape, and then the prince kind of caught up with her, and she kind of stood up for the deer, which is kind of cringy thinking about it, but guys fall for whatever, right? So yes, the prince kind of had a mini like introduction with her, and he kind of fell in love with her personality, and I think that's what Disney wanted to make sure they added in, so it did not seem shallow and like, oh, she's pretty, and then the guy go after her. Yes. So after all, that one versus the animated one is that they didn't actually meet at all until the ball. Yeah. And then also another thing to keep note that was different, a lot of these that are different are more towards the characters and how they act and the backstory they added in. The main storyline of how, like I mentioned, mother died, father died, evil stepsisters and mothers are evil, they go to ball, have godmother, are all the same, right? The ending where they get married, they're all the same. But the only differences are the characters themselves that had backstory and had more intention to what they do. So that kind of made the whole thing feel, at least to me, feels more like, oh, okay, there's reason. It's more rounded, like, yeah, what we learn. It's not so flat, right? Actually, would I consider it flat? Okay lah, a lot, to me, the evil stepmother one wasn't so flat. It was quite rounded. I like how they added in the element of why she acts so evil, and there's a part where she doesn't really understand. To me, it's like, you're so innocent and pure. By her saying that, it's kind of like she doesn't really understand. That's how I perceived it lah, at least when I was watching it. So it was really, to me, it was really interesting where I was trying to psychoanalyze this lady and be like, hey, that's kind of like all of us as people. I related it to myself, like if you get mad sometimes or like something is taken away from you, you tend to act differently unless you are just so strong. You're Ella. Sorry. Maybe Ella wasn't so rounded. Ella was more flat. She was just good all the way. So it just felt very like, I don't know, not much character development. I mean, yeah, poor thing for her. Her mom died, but it's not that much character development. Anyway, comparison, right? So the prince's father, the king, right, in the live action version, he mentions that something the king was really pushing for is for the prince to marry a princess. That wasn't emphasized in the animated one. In the animated one, the story was that the king wanted anyone to marry the prince. That's why the king offered, he said what would seem natural, because he knows that the son doesn't want to get married. So what would seem okay to do would be to invite everyone in the kingdom to the ball, right? So like it's kind of like he's very desperate for an heir and grandchildren. But in the live action one, I think they wanted to show that duality between father and son, and then later show them reconcile, so the bond, it has more depth to it lah. So in the live action one, the king said that he wanted to invite he didn't want to invite anyone. He wanted him to get married to a princess and he wanted a ball. But then the prince, now already knowing that the girl that he liked is a commoner, he insisted that he wanted to open the ball to everyone. Also, I forgot to mention, the prince, when he first met Ella in the live action one, he didn't mention that he was a king. I mean, he was a prince. He said his name was Kit and he's an apprentice. So yeah, he wanted to hide. He didn't want her feelings to be affected by that, which I think also is because, you know, Disney wants to make the storyline more like, ooh, he likes her for who she is. Interesting. Anyway, the prince wanted everyone to come, right? And then finally the father was like, okay, he accepts the deal. So for moving on, live action added a new character called the captain. In the animated one, the main like guy for that was like the service, what's that called, like the right hand man of the king, was called the Grand Duke. So in that movie, the Grand Duke, in the animated one, Grand Duke was good, but in the live action one, Grand Duke was evil, and they replaced him, the good person, with a captain. And also I think this was Disney trying to be like inclusion of everyone, so they put like a black guy as the good guy to show like, you know, we include everybody. But yeah, so anyway, the Grand Duke was evil and the captain is good in the live action one. Yeah, so the father kind of like, in the live action one, the king kind of schemes with the Grand Duke a bit, like he knows that the father kind of already he agreed for the prince to be married to this princess, even though he knows he wants to, you know, marry a commoner, which is that girl, because the father, I mean the prince kind of talks about it, like he said like, oh, this girl or something like that, like, but basically the father finds out lah. Okay, anyway, next character difference is fairy godmother. The whole thing is just character differences that I'm talking about, sorry. The fairy godmother versus fairy godmother in animated one. Okay, so the fairy godmother in the live action one, they added a scene for her where it showed that Cinderella was a good person. She was like an old hag there, and then Cinderella, she asked Cinderella when after the whole ball thing where she's crying and stuff like that, she asked her for like this is before she goes to the ball. She was crying because the evil stepsisters and mother pulled out her dress and ripped her dress to pieces. She asked her for like milk or something like that to eat because she's hungry, and Cinderella gives her food, right? And suddenly she turns into the fairy godmother to help her. So I think that versus the scene in the animated one where she sings and then suddenly fairy godmother just appears to help her, it again kind of shows us more character in Cinderella. Not that it's a very like rounded character or anything, it's still very flat because we know that she's just good. She just started off good lah. She's just very good person. I don't know. There wasn't much backstory, too much backstory or like reasoning to that. It's just that she's good and her mother told her be brave and kind. So yeah. And then the fairy godmother, an animated one, just appears there and she's like, oh, biddy body boo, and then helps her make all these stuff things. So yeah, that's like the main difference between the two. And then in the live action one, I'm going to be talking now about the Grand Duke and the Captain versus the Grand Duke in the animated one. So for the live action one, the Grand Duke, there was a scene where this is after he already he made a deal. Basically, this is after Cinderella comes to the party. Okay, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so sorry, Mr. Ade. Okay, I'm going to the ball scene now, okay? Boom, she's in a pumpkin that becomes like a carriage, and then she goes off, right? She goes off and then she enters the ball. The two similarities between the two is that the prince actually chooses to dance with her. So like she kind of comes in and the prince sees her and goes to her. So that was the two. I think they still wanted to keep some of the main elements from the animated to like pay homage to the animated one, because it was in 1950s. I mean, the animation was like, to me it was really cool that they were even able to draw that. Imagine hand by hand animation. It's like, oh my goodness, no computer. Okay, anyway, sorry, getting too excited. In the ball scene, he kind of goes there and then he goes to her and then they dance, and after they dance, in the animated one, they dance and stuff like that already. She realizes, oh, it's almost midnight, and then she kind of like gets out of there, right? But in the live action one, again, this is why I feel like the live action one is meant more towards young adults to adults, or maybe they're just trying to teach the kids to not be like watching those type of like the animated ones. They're trying to give them more like trying to develop them better. I don't know, but they had dialogue and they had this nice scene where they kind of bond over talking, and it's not so much of a dancing kind of thing like, oh, I dance already and then I touch her hand, and then, you know, it's like it's not so, again, shallow. It's very surface level only lah, the animated one. And the live action one, they kind of like bonded over like they kind of like, both of them are a bit quirky, you know, and then they're talking and then they kind of like each other's personalities and interests a bit, right? Until she realizes that it's almost 12 and she has to leave. And so both of those, finally they both leave and then left the shoe. All those main elements are the same. Grand Duke goes after him because instructed by the prince and the king to go after this mysterious girl, because the king doesn't really actually know that that girl is a commoner yet. He just like, oh whoa, but he already made, I mean the live action one, he already made a deal with the other princess. It's a lot of drama lah. They basically, live action just adds a lot of more drama versus the animated one, which is just you know, so you can choose which one you prefer. Anyway, the live action one, after they go through all of that already, basically the evil stepmother finds out in the live action one that she's the girl who went, right? And she makes a deal with the Grand Duke. This is what kind of tells us Grand Duke is actually evil. She's like, he knows that the prince, he told like the prince going to go search the country for the kingdom for this girl, right? And the Grand Duke is kind of citing the king, which is also in this story evil in the beginning, because he wants, I would view him as evil because he wants the prince to marry a princess only, like, which goes against what the prince actually wants for himself. And the prince, sorry, I'm mixing up the start of the story in my brain as I'm trying to explain this, but it's correct what I'm saying so far. So the Grand Duke makes a deal because the evil stepmother tells the Grand Duke that the girl that he's looking for is actually a maid, like a servant girl, and that'll be bad for the kingdom's like reputation, right, if the prince marries a servant girl. So she said okay. So basically the evil stepmother took the shoe, the glass slipper that after she came back from the ball, she hid it inside like a little area in her thing. So she took it and showed proof that she knows who this commoner girl, this secret mysterious girl is. And she tells again, servant girl. So he said okay. So she said he asked what you want in return. So this part again ties back to later when she explains why she's so evil lah. Okay, she says, I want my daughters to, what's that called, like marry like rich men or something like that, like people in power lah basically. And he said okay, settle, boleh, I take the shoe. And then he goes to, basically the prince like, no, I want you to find the whole kingdom, right? But she already knows he got the shoe already lah, and so he can basically scheme and stuff like that. So cut back to animated one didn't have any of this. Okay, not at all. The stepmother didn't know that the glass slipper was already, like, she didn't know that Cinderella was the girl at the ball, right? This animated one so she locks her in her room. Both movies lock Cinderella in the room, but the difference is that in the live action one, the lady knew, and that's why she made the deal, and there's a lot of backstory, right? But the animated one, she locks her in the room because she didn't want Cinderella to try out the shoe, just in case, she's like, you stay there, my daughters will go, right? So in the animated one, the evil stepmother takes the key, puts the pocket, and then the mice like has a, this is why it's meant for kids, because it's a lot towards the animation of the mouse, because there are a lot of chasing scenes and stuff, whereas live action one is more towards dialogue and storyline. So the animated one, the mice go in her pocket to get like the thing being chased by the cat and all those. Finally opens the door for her. Cinderella runs out and she's like, there is one more person here. After both the stepsisters failed to wear the shoe because their feet are really big, she's like, there's one more person here. And then she also holds up the glass slipper that she has, and she's like, oh. Then the Grand Duke let her try it, and then finally, yay, happy you get married, and then wedding bells and stuff like that. So it's kind of like nothing really happens to the evil step people also, right? They're just there. She just lives on her life marrying the prince, and that was the end. But whereas in the live action one, there is more storyline. I tell you now. Okay, so live action one, she's locked up in her room. The stepmother comes down, so there's no shoe for her to come out. Even if she come out, there's no shoe for her to like hold up, but she can try lah. Anyway, she's locked up in her room. Stepmother come down, asks the two stepsisters to try on the shoe. The Grand Duke was like, try on both already. Oh, cannot fit. Oh well, too bad. And then as the Grand Duke is leaving, Cinderella starts, Cinderella is singing in the attic. She's like, her voice very nice, singing. The mice help to open the window, and she doesn't really realize the window is open. So both of them ask these same questions in both animated and the what's that called, the live action, animated and live action. Is there any other maiden like in your household? And then she'll be like, no, there's no one else. The evil stepmother will be like, clearly lah, why would she want to show Cinderella's there, right? And then cut back. Basically, in both of them, Cinderella is there. And okay, sorry, now I'm not talking about the animated one anymore. Live action one, Cinderella starts singing, okay? And then the Grand Duke, everyone basically can hear like a very soft, nice voice. And then the captain turns around, the black guy, not the Grand Duke, the captain in the live action one, the good guy, turns around and kind of like he asks, are you sure there's no one else here? And he's like, no. Then he was like, oh, it's just probably my cat. And he said, no, by cat or something lah. Or either that or she just said no. And then the captain makes a joke like, oh, in that case your cat must be able to sing. And then he was like, laughing along. And this whole time the Grand Duke, the evil dude, is trying like, there's no one else. I think maybe you're mishearing it or something. Let's go. Let's tell them that we can't find anyone. And he said, Captain's like, no, I want to go and check the area. But the Grand Duke's like, no, there's no need for that. And then suddenly, big reveal. The prince reveals himself. He's one of the men riding on the horses, like pretending to be a guard. And he's like, you know what? I would like to go and check the area or something. And then it's like, oh, big reveal. They cannot believe. And finally, they go and finally the stepmother does open the door, because there's clearly an ethic, and he will like, based on the king's rule, you have to follow, right? King's orders. She opens the door. And then after she opens the door, she's like, oh, you see, it's just the servant girl. So she's trying to like, tone down her illegal activities. Just the servant girl. And then suddenly he was like, she's still a girl, I would like to try. Would you like to try wearing the shoe? And then the girl was like, yes. And then the girl goes down the staircase and then like, walks past the evil stepmother, like the eye kind of like staring, side-eyeing her, like, those stuff, like walking two directions. She goes down, and then the prince is the one that comes to her with the shoe. And it's kind of like, he from the script, that the dialogue that they have, you kind of know that they both know it's each other, because the whole time when you watch Cinderella animated one, you're like, how can he not realize they all look so different? You just want to smack it. But again, it's for kids, targeted for kids. The live action one is so obvious. They can't, it's so awkward if, let's say, they try to act like they don't know each other. So anyway, they both kind of know each other. You can get hints of that from the dialogue. They meet with like the shoe, and he slides it on to her, and then they're like, it's the girl. And then she goes out, but before she leaves the house, she kind of like, stops to tell the stepmother, I forgive you, and she walks out. So yeah, it kind of shows like the differences between how the live action one had more meaning to what all the characters. The characters were not really more character development, except for like the king. The king finally accepts her as a daughter. I mean, as a like daughter-in-law, and for the prince to marry him. But it had more character depth, right? Like reasons to why they act. So the characters felt more rounded versus the animated one. Also, the storyline, they added certain things that weren't in the animated one, like I've mentioned earlier, which makes it feel very like, again, got meaning to what they do. And based on what they actually show, the live action one was more focused towards the storyline, where the animated one was focused more to like certain Tom and Jerry like chasing scenes that were targeted towards the kids more, because it's very fast paced versus the live action one lah. Yeah, those are some of the main differences between the two. I prefer but then I don't know, animated one is really nostalgic to me, but storyline wise and narrative script wise, I mean the live action one was better. Thank you. Oh my goodness, it's 28 minutes long. I need to cut this. Sorry. Do I need to record? Oh my goodness. Okay, anyway.